You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where I talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. This episode, as with all the episodes for the last 6 months, is brought to you by the entertainment payroll company Extreme Reach. They have the most comprehensive suite of tools and services to support all areas of media and content creation, from tax incentive support to accounting software and payroll services. I'm very grateful for their support of this project and this mission, and I'm looking forward to our continued relationship in 2019. For this last episode of the year, I sat down with Paulina Lagudi. She is a filmmaker who just released her film, Mail Order Monster, which is available on all the streaming services. I gotta tell ya, this woman is an inspiration. She's an artist, a savvy business person, and a force to be reckoned with. She is one of the healthiest and most confident young people I have spoken to. You'll see what I mean in a minute. We talked about her film and its distribution, female empowerment of the right kind, setting boundaries, martial arts, and growing up the only girl in a family of men with a single father, and how instrumental her stepmother turned out to be. You can find us at theother50%.com for added features, photos, show notes, and the merchandise. Get yourself a mug for Christmas. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts and all the podcast places. And if you haven't already, check out the Kiss My Age show, which is where women of a certain vintage, grown-ups, talk about anything and everything and all the things that matter. It's hosted by Lasta Drakovic, Karen Samuelson, and me. We laugh, we cry, we learn stuff. On our last episode, we talked with Michelle Boyaner about the realities of taking care of our parents as they age and all the things that go along with that. I hope you and yours have a wonderful holiday season, a happy new year, and I'll be back with a new episode on January 8th. In the meantime, I gotta go make Christmas magic happen for my people. All right, here's my conversation with Paulina Lagudi. Have a listen. Well, let's start with big picture. What do you do?
So I produce, write, and direct. Always all of them.
Always all of them?
Always all of them at this point. I mean, I have been hired to write a feature, just write, because of Mail Order Monster, which has been great. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be the first time I'm just doing one of the hats.
Writer for hire.
Yeah, writer for hire, which is fun. But I do those three. I'm filming. Make films.
You're a filmmaker.
Filmmaker. Yeah.
Let's talk about your current film.
So Mail Order Monster.
Mail Order Monster.
Yeah, so it's out on the streaming platforms, which is great. iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, Microsoft, Vudu, Ubiquity, In Demand, like all the streaming main platforms that they go to.
So if I go on Roku, I can have my choice of where to get this.
Exactly. Yeah. We're just not on Netflix or Hulu at this point.
Okay.
And, but all the places where people watch indie films.
Give it time. So you got distribution. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it was very fast too, because we finished the film December 2017, screened it for friends and family and sales agents after shooting it in July. And then we were signed in January and then premiered in Berlin in February.
Wow.
And then releasing in November.
Fast.
Very fast.
Okay, let's talk about the journey of this film.
Yes.
Is this your first film?
First feature film, yeah.
First feature film.
Yeah.
Distribution out of the gate. Yeah. Okay, tell us the story.
Yeah, So I honestly, as much as I could, reverse engineer the process. So I purchased the script Mail Order Monster in 2016, October of 2016, and I completely changed the script. So kept the title, kept the fact that there was a kid and a monster, but originally it was two parents that ended up separating and getting back together, and lead was a young boy, and the monster, as soon as you put it together, it came to life. I never thought I'd direct a family film as my first feature film, especially based on my shorts that I've done in the past. But I really loved the title, and a lot of people that I knew in distribution had mentioned how catchy the title was. Mm-hmm. And family films, if you're going to do your first feature film, there's at least some sort of demand at the time for that. Because horror had kind of had a huge influx after everyone was like, oh, make horror films for cheap. I was like, I don't really want to make a horror. But I loved family movies because you can incorporate so many subgenres within that genre. I loved family movies, from the 80s and the 90s. And at the same time, I also wanted to create a movie that I related to with my own family. I have a stepmom. I didn't really relate to a lot of typical family movies, because my family was bit of a single dad growing up, and my stepmom came in later in life, and, you know, I'd seen, like, movies like E.T., there's no dad around, but there's not a lot of discussion about what it means to have a new member of the family come in and have that person be positive. Often it's like step monster, or, you know, or in R-rated stuff, it's like the stepdad's the, you know, child molester or something like that. It's like the step parents, there's never really a good, very rarely is there a good role for them to play where they're, you know, a positive character in the child's life. So I wanted to take this opportunity to take that wheel that's been done before, and especially ones of the past where they, you know, take on such a great sci-fi type of adventure, fantasy adventure, but turn the wheel a little bit of a different way by implementing it in today's world in blended families and the change that so many kids are going through. And so many families and parents and everyone goes through. So rewrote the film. I had the first draft by December 2016. November, December, big months for me, I guess. So rewrote the film. And before that, I knew I'd had the possibility for funding even before I purchased the script, too. So it wasn't something like, oh, I got the script, now I got to go look for funding. I kind of looked at my situation and spoken to people before and, you know, done the tax incentive thing and structured a whole business plan before I even purchased the script. And then once I pretty much had a go-ahead from there and a lot of interest, purchased it, rewrote it, shot it, boom.
Now wait, did you have financiers before you started?
Yes.
How?
Yeah. Private equity. Just from relationships in my own life, just a lot of people know I'm in the film industry. My family's been in the food business for a very, very long time. I come from Vegas. And so I just knew a lot of entrepreneurs. I knew a lot of business people. And the way we essentially structured our tax plan for our film was very beneficial for investors, even if we essentially had a loss.
Smart.
So I was, you know, there's no guarantee, but yeah, this is where the benefit could be. And from there, just essentially had my whole plan, and it was a matter of just checking off the boxes. And there were so many hiccups that came throughout the process, but having that plan and being able to just kind of push through and check off those boxes throughout the process was really important for me, especially having that all planned ahead of time as a producer, because I knew I was directing it as well. I brought on a production consultant about midway through the writing process around April, on like my third or fourth drafts, Stacy Park. She has a whole forum and site and everything called Film Specific, and it's amazing. Essentially what she does is you pay a fee, and she will consult on your film, and she won't take any points or anything like that. So she comes from a distribution background of like 13 years of foreign distribution on films. So she has amazing contacts and really can vet sales agents, set up meetings, set up distributor meetings. At the same time, also vet your talent, see who's bankable worldwide, especially for the budget that you have and everything like that. So she was very pivotal in that respect. And but she'll also do things if people are looking for an executive producer, she'll come on, help get funding. She takes a percentage, and it's a whole other ball game. But I wanted to keep mine as contained as possible, mostly because I'd seen so many indie films shoot themselves in the foot because they have too many producers on board.
Yeah.
And I was like, the only way this movie is going to have remotely any success is if the turnaround's fast, because so many films shoot themselves in the foot. Also, by sitting in post too long, and then you miss your market and everything like that. So everything's moving so fast. I don't know how long the family market's going to be a thing. I mean, even in a year, it's changed so much. I couldn't imagine I've been sitting on this for longer than that. So it was really just about shoot, aim, fire with this whole process. Like I said, we shot it in 17 days, which is crazy when you've got a kid and a monster and in the middle of a very small town in Kentucky. I mean, 1,600 people. So, I mean, Starbucks was an hour and a half away.
Just to give you some
perspective.
perspective.
Just to give you some perspective.
Now, did you take a California kid?
So I took a California kid, but she had a home in the Kentucky area. So essentially she could act as a local because her family's from the South. And then PJ was Kentucky local. And then the two adult actors were from LA, obviously, Josh and Charisma. So we brought them, but everyone else was Kentucky local.
Great.
Which is how we were able to maximize the tax incentive as well.
Yeah, and was the town really helpful?
Super helpful. I mean, especially when you're dealing with low budget stuff, it's kind of like a toss up of, do we shoot here because the tax incentive's great? But at the same time, we're going to have to bring in so much infrastructure. So is that cost going to be beneficial? That was a bit of an issue, but at the same time, we were able to get just the resources and locations, extras, and hands for free or so cheap that it was just like no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when am I going to get 130 kid extras in a giant school as production value on a very, very tiny budget? It's just like, it's not going to happen, you know what I mean?
But they were thrilled to have you, probably.
So thrilled. It was very much a community experience. I mean, a lot of them, too, there's a film school, like film program at Bowling Green, which was a few towns over, at their university. I think it's called WKU, Western Kentucky University. And a lot of those students came and had their first time on a film set, so that was a lot of fun. It was really great, and the kids always have a blast. Madison Horcher, who plays Sam, she had been on a couple Disney movies, Adventures in Babysitting, so a lot of the young kids knew who she was and were really, really excited.
So exciting!
Yeah, they were like just thrilled, and she and her family are the best, so that was really great. So yeah, and we shot it the hottest time of the year, as you do, with humidity through the roof. So yeah, and then we get back and we're like, what just happened? This was crazy. Especially too in Kentucky, you don't realize the amount of thunderstorms one gets.
Oh.
Oh right, yeah, thunderstorms.
A lot of this was outside.
Oh yes. So the continuity of sky was often amazing. How we were able to do this. Yeah, there are plenty of times where I'm like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? But it works out. I mean, a lot of times you have to surrender to the universe, and that's what happened. The post-process was a lot of fun for this, though, because that's where the monster really got to come to life. I did the voice of the monster, which was a lot of fun. And this, my sound team really built the monster, every single sound effect and everything. I mean, we're also kind of doing a bit of an ode to, the Gremlins and E.T. with the puppeteering aspect and the very practical aspect of the monster not being CGI or anything like that, because, we were just missing 100 million somewhere.
We're just 100 million short.
Yeah, just 100 million short, so we just decided to go ahead anyway. But yeah, so then we moved, just really fast. I mean, for me, it was, this is my deadline, which is I wanted to have it done by December because I knew EFM was in February, and I really wanted to hit up all them. I just wanted to hit the ground running in 2018 and be like, here's the movie. Get people on board, especially if all the meetings I had at AFM in November. Everyone was like, can we see the movie? Can we see the movie? Like, no.
In a minute.
No. Which typically, for indies, you would send a rough cut.
Yeah.
For mine, I could not do that because one of the main characters, which was the monster, just wasn't built. I'm like, if you're going to watch it and be like, this is absolutely terrible, because you're just going to hear this squeaky monster that is not built. It just wasn't built, so it's going to look terrible.
There was someone inside it, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the whole thing is built out of foam.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. The only thing is the head is fiberglass, because the girl that built it is just incredible. Her name's Nora Hewitt. She's the season 9 winner of Face Off, that special effects makeup show. So she's got a great audience and is the coolest person, and she built this thing with her team, and it was amazing.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, really, really cool, except of course we had one, so,
Be very, very careful.
Very careful. A lot of patch-ups during the time.
Set that down gently.
Yes.
Okay, can we back it up a little bit?
Yeah, I just kind of pummeled through that whole process there.
Oh, no, it's good.
Okay.
But I want to hear, how did you start? Where'd you grow up? How'd you get in? Because you hit the ground knowing a bunch of stuff.
Right. I know, everyone's always like, hey. So I went to Chapman. Actually, I didn't go to their film school. I went to their theater school. I was a dancer growing up competitively my whole life. And right before my senior year of high school, when you audition for colleges, and that's our track. I went to a performing arts high school, the whole thing. Yeah. I really, really badly broke my foot, to the point where doctors were like, you're never going to be able to do anything again, right? And
performing arts high school where?
In Vegas.
Oh.
Yeah, so Las Vegas Academy of Performing Arts, great people come out of that school. So I think, who's really famous that's come out of that school? I think Juliana Hough went there for a little bit.
Is it like Show People's Kids?
It's like Fame. Yeah. It's the Fame school. Yeah, exactly. Really, really good school. And so I went to LVA, dancer competitively growing up, break my foot. What am I going to do
That's
with
a
my life?
bummer.
Right, big bummer.
Had you already auditioned for college?
Not yet. So
Yikes.
This was in May. I had surgery, and then auditions for college were in October. Rehab myself in 3 months, completely back to dancing again.
Amazing.
I'm a very, very stubborn human being, apparently.
Helps to be young.
Yeah, helps to be young and have pretty much cartilage for bones. And I pretty much removed myself from the dance world, mostly because of how I was treated, I was alone throughout my entire process of surgery. Every coach, every friend I had where I dedicated 12 hours a day to, just completely didn't talk to me because I had essentially screwed over their competition season because, they had to reformat everything. And so I was just wow,
man.
Really terrible.
Yeah.
And, when you're 17, everything's super, super dramatic.
And personal.
And I'm like, what am I doing with my life? I'm so depressed. But it was a blessing, and I had a lot of friends that were in the theater department, and I had done a lot of shows, theater shows as well. And they're like, hey, just audition for the theater programs. I was like, great. got into Chapman, which was awesome. And, I was the first one in my family to go to college. So they're like, yeah, theater sounds great. What a degree. But what was great about Chapman is the theater school and the film school actually do work pretty closely together. There's a lot of crossover. So I was able to get on film sets, learn a lot, pretty much as much as I could, but at the same time, I still was very new to everything filmmaking. I didn't know any filmmakers. I didn't even know you could really go to school for it.
That's a thing?
Like, that's a thing. I'm like, how does anyone make a film when you're in high school? Like, what do you do with your little video camera? That looks terrible. So I go to Chapman. I graduate Chapman. And 2 months after that, I end up on a set of an indie film where I meet my fiance, my now fiance, and he's a cinematographer. And I was just assisting an actor. I wasn't even doing anything crazy. Fast forward a year later from that, I'm doing digital utility on the set. I'm pretty much like helping with the producers. Like, it's a whole thing. I just fell in love with filmmaking. My fiance was like, you kind of have the mind of a producer and a director, and I really think you should do this. I was like, really? Maybe. Like,
okay.
Yeah, I was like, hey, I've always had these ideas to make things. I just never knew how to do them. He's like, well, I do. I went to film school. Like, let's go do this. And we did. I mean, and from 2015 to 2017, so when we made the feature, we did multiple short films, we did some branded content, some commercials, and that was just from learning everything I possibly could. I would go to conferences, I'd read things, I'd go online, I'd be a part of forums, I listened to every podcast. Like, I asked so many questions to people I shadowed. I just did everything.
You're like, I'm doing this.
Made so many mistakes along the way with my own little shorts, but I'm like, they're shorts, it's no big deal, da 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 da. And I just learned as much as I could. I grew up in a business world too. Like, my dad is an entrepreneur, and I grew up with very close to him being a single dad for, a good chunk of my life. And so I often looked at, the film industry as just another industry, and often being very fascinated by distribution and marketing, and fascinated by the whole supply and demand in an industry that just seems to have a complete supply and no longer a demand. So, like, how does this work? And just and whenever people are very pessimistic about an industry, I always get very opportunistic, because I mean, there's something there that people haven't discovered yet, or there's something there where usually the way I kind of look at it is, well, if everyone's thinking pessimistic, then there's going to be an open door. That's essentially what Netflix did,
Yeah.
So very interested in it, and then, saw this opportunity because I was brought on to line produce the movie Mail Order Monster, the old one, the original script, by a different director-producer. And his funding fell through, and his option ran out on the script, and that's when I snagged it.
You're like, I'll take that. Thank you.
Took it. And then made it myself.
How did that work out with that director?
He lost the option. He doesn't own any of it. So, because he had
only optioned it. Are you still friends?
Well, we weren't even friends before that. He had come into contact with me through someone that we knew. It was a mutual friend, and he brought me to line produce it, and I line produced this whole thing, pretty much, saying you're going to get paid when, silly me.
Yeah. So you'd prep the whole thing?
I prepped the entire thing, but for a completely different movie, so I had to start from scratch. Budget was even lower, so it was a micro budget, and the script was actually even more intense. So it was.
And we haven't talked about the budget. You were under $1 million.
Yeah, very much. And this one, the original one was micro. Mine was like SAG modified. Theirs is micro. And so when he lost funding, he was like, I lost the funding. And then 3 months after that, I saw that he lost the option on the script. So he'd only optioned the script from the writer. I bought it. So I bought all the rights. So the writer was like happy.
Yeah, smart.
Because he sold it, and that way I could own all the rights. I could make the adjustments that I needed to make. I gave him co-writer credit because for me, I always thought too, like, I want to direct. That's really what I want to do, direct and stuff. I never really saw myself as a writer. This is my first feature film script that I wrote. I'm like, I don't care. And now look at me. I've been hired to write a script. So I'm like, I don't know anything anymore.
It was just a means to an end.
It was just a means to an end. I really never care about that stuff anyway. And so that's pretty much how I ended up here, really, is just from knowing that I always have a fascination with this industry. I love storytelling. Having been a dancer growing up, I just have this fascination with storytelling without words. So it really that transition actually became quite more organic to directing than to writing.
Yeah, and it's so visual.
So visual, and there's blocking, and the lighting is so important with dance, especially live shows.
And the stagecraft of it all.
The whole stagecraft of it. So that was something that I found everything kind of just fit when I started to direct versus writing. I had to really practice.
So did you learn the directing through doing your shorts?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I just started to watch a lot of stuff that I liked. And I have a whole spreadsheet of directors that I've watched and like their things and what they've done and, you know, all these movies that I've watched and their distribution companies. I have so many spreadsheets on this stuff. And I just studied as much as I could. I'd watch like a movie a day for 30 days. I did a whole challenge. And
you're not just sitting back and letting that movie wash over you.
No.
You're looking at the angles and how it's put together.
I'm just like, why do I care about this? Why do I don't care about this? What is it about this shot? And then I would try a lot of things that certain directors did that I loved in my shorts too, which often were kind of, you know, like for instance, one of my first short films, This Is How, I was obsessed with the movie Shame by Steve McQueen. He's like one of my favorite directors of all time. And Shame's a pretty controversial movie, I guess. And he does this long, just dolly push in to two people sitting at a restaurant. The whole opening of This Is How is a 2-minute dolly push. That's it. It's just like straight boom, boom, boom.
From really far away?
Yeah, from really far away. Actually, it might be longer than 2 minutes. It might be 5 minutes, I assume. Whole script is a page and a half, but this short's 12 minutes long. It's like, I don't know how that worked out. So I would, you know, I essentially just found my style through things that I liked and then did a lot of trial and error. Thankfully, what gave me the most, I guess, school of directing really was I would do a lot of branded content for either, you know, little products or hotels or something where I could only shoot for one day at their location and get everything and then be out. So I learned how to really shot list beforehand, but then if things weren't there, adapt on the fly and still tell the story, but for this product. And then that really ended up coming in handy on the movie because everything was just, I mean, I'd have locations that I'd lose the day before and then I'd have to get new ones. And I'm like, cool. Or, you know, I plan 5 shots and they're like, it's now 1. You're like, great, got it. All the coverage and, you know, just make it a move. It's fine. We're good. So it's just been a lot of like knowing where I want to end up and just kind of just getting there somehow.
And you had all the theater training as well.
And the theater training helped a lot with working with actors and being able to communicate in a way where they felt like they could trust me, but they could also talk as an actor, you know? They're not talking to someone.
You speak the language.
Yeah, I speak the language, understand the psychology of everything, but also having a fiance that's a DP, I also really know that world too. And that was the world that I needed the most training on. So having essentially like a live-in crash course for 3.5 years at the time before the movie, really handy.
And did he work on your film?
Oh yeah, we've shot, he's the only DP I've ever worked with. Oh. Yeah, I'm not the only director he's ever worked with. So there's
he cheats on you with other directors sometimes?
I always say that all the time, but I'm his favorite.
Rude.
I know, I'm his favorite. I know, I always have to be extra good so that way he comes back. But yeah, that's essentially how it all went. It's so funny because looking back on it, I'm always like, yeah, I guess it all happened really fast, but there were so many, 2016, you know, we did 2 short films and then I line produced this feature that ended up being nothing and I bought the script. But that year I remember feeling like I've done nothing with my life.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
I think we shot like a couple little branded things, but you know, I've been broke so many times and then gotten money here and then done, like it's just as a filmmaker when you're starting out, you spend money in the wrong areas, you do the wrong things, you do this job that they're supposed to pay you and they don't. There's so many things I did wrong, but like looking back, it's, wow, we actually did a lot, you know, so.
Yeah, and it all leads to the place.
It all leads to the place. I mean, I'm definitely not at the place yet at all, but.
You are getting there.
I feel like now I'm not throwing so much spaghetti at the wall and hoping something sticks. I've got a little bit more of a plan. So yeah, that's essentially the life of how Mail Order Monster came into existence.
Yeah, I'm not worried about you. I think you're going to be just fine. Oh my God. Tell me that, I'm curious, talking to you, have you felt any obstacles because you're a woman?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'd never felt that way before the feature. And then I did the feature.
And then what happened?
So this is the thing that's really interesting. And I've had this question brought up a couple times, but I never really answered it fully as I wanted to now that I've had time to kind of marinate over the question.
This is your chance.
Yeah. When I got onto the feature, I was very aware of the fact that it was my first time. And I was very anxious about that fact. And therefore I hired a lot of people that were they're a lot more experienced, a lot older than me in key areas. And oftentimes they were men. And the minute they didn't do their job or didn't do what I asked and I had to tell them, that's when all of a sudden they just didn't work. It was, at first I thought it was, oh, maybe is that how I'm speaking to them? And then I'd see them just address my fiance.
Oh.
Yeah, and not me at all. I'm Italian. So I'm like, I'm pretty much the kind of person that will tell you straight up, like, don't mess with me. You know what I mean? So I had no problem telling them how it is, but that actually ended up being something where I was torn because I was somewhere remote, so I couldn't fire people.
Right.
That ended up being an issue because, and also what a lovely learning experience and obstacle to go through now, having to work with that the entire time and still make your movie work.
How did you adjust?
I worked without them. I essentially just worked without them. So, for instance, one of my very key positions, who's actually, it was so funny, is his role, like his job was essentially called out for being so bad in a review that came out recently, and I was like, yes! I was like, sucks that that's for my movie, but at the same time, thank you for calling that person out, because, yeah, they completely dropped the ball and just called it in, and like, you would sleep in their car, I mean, and I'm paying this person, you know what I mean? The only way I could address it is for the longest time I had my line producer, who's also female, address these people. She was also almost assaulted by someone on set that was, this is a whole other scenario, this much older man, because he got so angry because she kept telling him that he was over budget, which he was. And I would just straight up tell people, like, get out, you know, and then I would just do it without them.
Back up one moment. So what, the guy's going to beat her up because he's over budget?
Like, had to be held
she mentioned
back.
It?
Like, he's, you know, this giant 6-foot-something guy, like, comes at her, and, like, then the other, the UPM and the production coordinator come in and, like, have to take him out. I'm on set directing. I come in, I'm like, you gotta be, this is happening, you guys, come on. So there's so many times.
They can act like that?
You'd be surprised. I mean, I'll tell you some things to this podcast that get more, because, like, you know, I don't want to name names for you know, legal purposes, but people, it's more of an ego thing than a male thing. There were a lot of males on set that were great. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, my DPs, you know, my fiance's male. He's one of the most respectful human beings. He only sees the rank. He doesn't see gender, essentially. You know, like, I'm here to serve the director no matter what. I'm the DP. I will always be there for my team. We had a female gaffer.
Oh,
but it was interesting because, you know, there were times where I would often, as a producer, address my team in certain ways, whether it be like, you know, key grip or whatever, and saying, hey, you guys can't do this, this, and this, as a producer. Mm-hmm. And then later on find out that they're saying, hey, don't work as hard because she said to do this, and we don't like that she's saying that.
So we're going to do a slow down?
We're going to slow down.
Passive aggressive?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So I just clock it. Because how I think in my head is this, you know what, I got to get through this.
Yeah.
And you've made the very silly mistake of underestimating me because of my gender. Mm-hmm. So I'm in a position in life where I get to hire people.
Yeah.
You're not in that position, unfortunately. So.
And you're no longer on my list.
And you're no longer on my list. So now, you know, months later when I get texts or whatever saying, hey, do you have any jobs? I just won't answer.
Right.
Or I just say, unfortunately, no.
You're dead to me.
You're dead to me. Shade is closed is always what I like to say. Shade is closed, we lock it up, throw away the key. So it's one of those things where you just have to, you can't be there to, I made the mistake of always trying to, prove a point, or I have to teach you a lesson.
Yeah.
Because I'm female and this and da da da.
You got to learn.
You got to learn not to talk to people like that. And couldn't be a worse way to handle it, to really be honest, because they're your team regardless. You know, if you're ever in the lovely position of being able to fire people, great. But even when you fire people, I mean, you're out for a day. Like, right. Low budget stuff, there's so many consequences to those actions. Like, you really have to be the person that keeps ego out of it. And 9 times out of 10, if you are, and these were very, I will say, they were few situations. Like, majority of the people were phenomenal.
But do you want to have a fight, or do you want to make a movie?
Yeah, exactly. And I want to make my movie. And I think as long as you stick to your guns on a lot of things and don't underestimate your own gut. Like, these people I already had a bad gut feeling about before going into production. But because I felt I didn't have enough experience and they were going to bring all this, you know, their giant resumes or whatever.
You needed to prove it.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean.
You won't do that again.
Yeah, I will, no matter I don't care about resume anymore. Yeah. I mean, if you are a good person and you have great vision and you have great work ethic, like, you're in. Because I've been on the side of people who have the awards and have all this stuff and then just have them completely drop the ball, but not just drop the ball and not be able to pick it up. Drop the ball and walk away and, you know, throw me the middle finger at the end, you know. I don't care if you drop the ball, pick it up. We all drop the ball. You know what I mean?
It can all be figured out.
It all can be figured out.
Nice.
I mean, that's movie making. We're just making a movie. Don't get, you know, your panties in a bunch, essentially. For lack of better terms. But so my biggest, like, I guess, advice and, you know, lesson to myself after that was, 1, always trust your gut, and 2, smile, log it, and keep moving forward. You know, keep your ego out of it. A lot of times as a director, you are a personality manager just to get people to do what you want them to do. So if you know someone's got a sensitive ego and they happen to be on your set, I mean, you may just have to talk to them in a different way. Now, if they still can't do the job, then you got to find a way to, like, either remove them or just move on without him. I mean, you know what I mean? Just like take him aside. I don't know. It's an interesting place to be. But that's been the only instance where I've had an issue as a woman. Every other time on set, it's been great. And most of the time it's because I never really give people a reason to question me, because I'm always like, yep, this is it, this is what we're doing, da, da, da. And everything's always just gone so smoothly.
You seem fairly confident.
Thank you. But I realize, like, you have to be. Almost overly so. I mean, I always tell people, I don't care if you call me, like, a bee or something like that. I know I am. So you saying it doesn't really...
Yeah, this is still what we're doing.
I mean, you can call it I'll say it to you. You know, you can say whatever behind my back. I'll say it to my own face. Like, this is what it is. And I'm a nice person. I'm not like... don't really care I'm paying you. I don't care. It's gonna get done. So that's been the only, like I said, that's been the only situation where that's really been an issue for me. And even in sales and distribution, I mean,
that was my next question about that piece.
That was interesting as well, because and I brought my dad to AFM with me, because he's really good at just asking. He always says he asks the dumb questions, because he's Australian. I'm half Australian, and so he has a big Aussie accent. And he's like, I never graduated high school. He like got out when he was 15, but he's like, great businessman. So he's like, I'll ask the dumb questions. That way you don't have to feel like you have to ask the dumb questions. I'm like, I don't care either way, but that works. And it was interesting because everyone would always be super surprised that I knew what I was talking about. I'm like, I mean, I did make a movie. Like,
I got something going on.
I mean, I'd like to think that most people, when they decide to make a movie, maybe figure out what they're doing beforehand, but I guess not, or maybe they just underestimate me because of, being a woman, I don't know. But they'd often address my dad in a lot of ways, but also having my dad there, I guess, provided a lot of credibility. The year before at AFM, I went completely alone. And that's when I had just bought the script, and I was shopping around different log lines to kind of find what really fit. And I was asking so many questions and learning about the market. And people were very respectful and whatnot, but it wasn't the same. It's not the same as when you're there for business.
Yeah.
But also what was interesting about AFM this year is everything was about female directors and features female, and that's how I became aware of the Alliance of Women Directors, and I got involved in that as well. But it is, I mean, I'm kind of used to it. I grew up with my dad and my brother for a long time, just them, so I'm always used to having to not ever overcompensate, but kind of, I just know that feeling, so it wasn't very foreign to me, or I was never offended by anything. I think just, especially my age with my gender is what usually gets me. If I was a little bit older, I don't think people would question me as much, but it's because I'm a young first-time female director, and people's like, she's just so silly, I'm like, okay, keep expectations low, I guess.
It's like this race to get old enough to be taken seriously, and then there's a small window before you're too old to be taken seriously.
Yeah, right. You catch it, and you're back down. But I don't know. I mean, I never feel... I guess sometimes I'm just so focused on getting what I need that I don't really focus too much on how things are perceived, because
You're not worrying about it.
I'm not worried about it. I'm like, as long as we get there.
Yeah, good.
Whatever, But that's been my experience. I know people have had much different experiences than myself, but that's been the one time where I was like, oh man, I've never said you guys would have treated me differently if I was a male, but that was the one time I did, was during this feature process.
Yeah, but you don't strike me as someone who will shrink in a room.
No. I mean, I do martial arts. I fight. So I always tell people, I do Krav Maga. I teach women self-defense. Like,
don't F with me.
Yeah, I mean, like, we'll do it. Yeah. I'm not gonna, you know what I mean? We'll take this down.
Okay, what is next for you?
So I'm writing a lot, but I've also been making, what's funny is after you make a feature film, the release is way later than when you're done with it. So you're often sitting here being like, cool, made a feature. No one cares. Back to the drawing board. Made some shorts, working a lot trying to break into commercial directing. I do a lot with food because my family's been in the food business, so I love shooting food and working with chefs. So building my reel in that respect. And then also been hired to write this feature family film based on a true story by this company that was interested in distributing Mail Order Monster, actually. And then they brought me on to write their film, which is pretty cool because it's already got distribution. And I'm like, I don't have to worry about anything.
Fantastic.
Super cool. And also very interesting to be on the other side of contract signing. I'm like, you trying to get me? You know what I mean? So, and then I'm also writing my own feature that's completely different, but still...
Different genre?
Different genre, but still within the family, not family genre, but within the world of families and young girls. I love that subject. I love the subject of 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds. I think so much happens as a human, but not just for yourself, but how people treat you. So much shift. And especially, because I teach women self-defense, I see a lot, of all ages, but I see a lot, especially, being someone who's so passionate about empowerment, but the right kind of empowerment. I'm really passionate about that. And so I'm writing a script that deals more with that world. So still family subject, not family genre, but trying to find the time to write that has been interesting, because I wrote the whole feature and then I just ripped it up and I was like, that was fun. That's terrible. We're starting from scratch, taking this route now.
Oh, the shitty first draft.
Which I love. But that's something that I'm working on right now. So just back to the drawing board, learning a lot from the first time around as a writer and as a director, and just trying to constantly grow and then push deeper and deeper into eventually ending up somewhere where, I can be represented, I can get work, but also at the same time just really telling the stories that I want to see for what I needed when I was younger, but also for what I want my future children to see, that kind of thing. So
can you go back to tell me what the distinction is, because you're interested in empowerment, but the right kind of empowerment.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, interesting, because I often get in this conversation with a lot of people. Again, teaching women self-defense teaches you a lot about female empowerment. Teaches you a lot about how much control you really do have over your voice. Is so important. It's something that we're not often using, right? Because we're not taught to use it a lot as females. I struggled with it a lot growing up.
I'm finding that hard to believe.
I know, it's funny. It's hard to believe, but I got there.
What made a shift for you?
My stepmom.
Oh.
Honestly enough, and what's so funny is she couldn't hurt a fly at all, but she is someone that, she never had kids before she met my dad, and she was a very strong, independent woman. And what's so funny is I always looked at her as being she's so tall and she's blonde, and when she first came into my life, I was 13, and I'm like, that's what I need to look like. 'Cause, she was essentially, this is the ideal woman, and I, had so many issues because of that. But what's funny is later on, as we've gotten older and our relationship's grown and I've been able to see things from so many different points of view, it's been so interesting to watch her navigate a world and stick to her boundaries, right? She's just so good about saying, nope, that doesn't work for me. This does work for me. This is what I allow. This is what I don't allow. And growing up a people pleaser, growing up as having to navigate my dad, who's a single parent, but also my mom at the time, is, we have a very terrible relationship. She does, with the whole family, because she's an addict and whatnot. That was a very codependent relationship. So using my voice was just non-existent. So it's interesting because my stepmom, we're so different. I fight and I do all these things, and she's like an ex-hairdresser. But she taught me more about what it meant to be a strong woman than my dad. My dad has taught me so much about what it means to be a strong businesswoman. Yeah. Right. And now I've been able to actually grow into that because of my stepmom. So what I mean about being empowered in the right ways is, I mean being empowered in a way of taking ownership of what you can control, right? Taking ownership of naming your boundaries in your life now, before something happens. I love female empowerment as in, yes, we root each other on, but don't forget to know where you root yourself on, if that makes sense. It becomes a lot about boost women here and boost women there, which I love. And, we need more women than this, we need more women in that, and just, putting more women in spaces. Awesome, all for it. But don't forget what it means to be a woman that takes ownership of her own life, takes ownership of her own safety, takes ownership of her own boundaries.
Brilliant.
I had someone the other day tell me, I'm lucky I've never been sexually assaulted. And I was like, I don't think I'm lucky. I was like, it depends how, you define it, because many positions I've been in, you could have easily labeled as sexual assault, but to me at the time, that wasn't my line.
Right.
That wasn't my line for sexual assault. My line for sexual assault was 2 steps after that, and then it would have been a nice jab to the face, right? Would have been great. I studied abroad in Rome, and I pretty much the whole time was alone, and I carried a screwdriver up my sleeve. I mean, there were times where I was like, don't make me whip it out. Don't make me whip it out. So for me, it was I think it just, know yourself, know your lines, be empowered in what it means to not live in a victimized mentality. I think it's very dangerous for young kids, especially in social media. This story, which was incredible, of this young girl, she came into one of my self-defense classes, and her mom brought her there, parents brought her there because she's 13 and she's developed for her age and doesn't look 13 online. Yeah. And what happens when that girl starts reaching out for validation, because every 13-year-old is super insecure, no matter what. Yeah. No matter how great their life is, they're always insecure. So what does that look like when they start reaching out for validation in the wrong areas? So that's what I mean about empowerment. It's like empowerment in young kids, use their voice, know your boundaries ahead of time before something happens. And that's something that I think I would like to, I think often gets either taken for granted or gets lip service, but doesn't really get a chance to be explored and taught as much as the other ways in how women need to be represented more.
Well, I don't think it gets spoken about.
Just doesn't
You're
get
the first person I'm hearing talk about this.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah.
I think maybe because my own world we talk about it because I teach it. But again, it's unfortunate because a lot of people come there preemptively, but a lot of women come there so late in the game.
Yeah.
You know, having been either, you know, victims of domestic violence or, you know, worse, rape, having to deal with that after the fact, you're dealing with
Trying
something.
to get it back.
Yeah, you're dealing with something that is, one, therapeutic, and two, what it means to fight for their lives within themselves. You know, it's a different type of fight for your life. So it's interesting having dealt with that. And so that's why I think I look at kids and I look at young girls. It's just so important today, more than ever, about what it means to, you know, now be like approaching that world of you're going from a kid to a woman and your parents are like, oh no, you're going from a kid to a woman. How do we look at you? You know, how do we start talking to you? Because that's such a huge shift. I know that from when I was growing up as well. And have them not be afraid of that, but be empowered by that and say, I get to name my boundaries. I get to have control over my life now.
Yeah.
You know? So that's something I want to preach, I guess.
Something I would like to ponder with you, because this comes up a lot for me with all the talk about girls and self-defense, and hardly any talk about let's teach boys not to assault women.
Yeah.
You know? And I always think that should have more of the focus. Except hearing you talk about it, I'm like, well, yeah, we should all be doing that. It's so important, but what do you think?
It's interesting because there's a lot of young boys that I train as well, especially at Krav. It's mostly a male-oriented environment. You get a lot of military, you get a lot of cops. The most respectful people. And it's interesting because we always laugh that in Krav we don't discriminate. We'll punch everyone in the face. And girls have the biggest advantage because they get to kick the guy in the balls. And the guys. That's how it is. Again, using your voice. I think it comes down to, it's just sad because kids, I mean, it's just you see what you see, you do what's talked about. When everyone's talking about boys sexually assaulting and men sexually assaulting, it's like, unfortunately, kids just they're not learning the good. Young boys should be taught not to sexual assault, but I hate to say don't sexual assault in a way that's something that you're going to do. You know, like, don't say it, like, not in a way where, oh, it's just in you, you're going to do it eventually. Try and prevent that urge to sexually assault.
Right. Like, that's the given.
Like, that's
you have
the
to
given.
fight against it.
And you have to fight against it, because that's unfortunate, because that's a confusing state to be in. I think when you do naturally, hormonally have feelings, and when no one's using their voice properly and things are taken the wrong way, and now someone feels sexually assaulted, and someone is now being like, oh, I'm going to be the dog. There's a lot of room there where when this person doesn't define what they're doing, and this person doesn't define what they're doing, or doesn't ask questions, it's really hard to know what's right and what's wrong. I think you, with young boys, obviously teach respect for women. Respect for everyone, but really respect women. And the minute that you don't, women, you better teach them how to respect you. People just have to be taught. I mean, I always say, like, there's always going to be bad people. There's always going to be bad people. I've come across so many bad people. I just have to teach people that they can't be bad to me. That's all I can control. I mean, I have a brother that's younger than me, and he's never really sexually assaulted in his life. I mean, he grew up with a dad, and, you know, he was a great guy, but he was a single dad and living in Vegas. You know what I mean? Like, there was never a time where my brother even looked at that as an option, because when he always knew what it was like to grow up with a sister that would punch him in the face. I mean, essentially, not to say punching in your face is the end all be all, but he always knew what it meant to have a female figure that set the boundaries. And when my stepmom came in, that was a big one for him too. He always knew what it was like to have an older woman say, hey, this is yes, this is no. I do like this, I don't like this. My stepmom will laugh all the time because she'll tell you, she's like, oh my God, being a hairdresser, she goes, you'll have people just grab you. Like, men who are your friends, just because she goes, I've been in the weirdest situations, like being sexually assaulted as a hairdresser. She goes, but I just stop what I do when I tell them to leave. I mean, that's just it. End all be all. Like,
we're done here.
We're done here. Because they thought something, and she goes, they ended up apologizing because they thought there was something that wasn't there.
This is an intimate thing. Someone's in your hair.
Yeah, and they've been friends for so long, and they're, you know, you end up becoming a therapist, so you end up like emotionally talking to them in ways of, oh, you understand me so much better than someone else.
Yeah.
So it's brought up some really interesting topics. But when it comes to like teaching young boys not to sexually assault, I'd rather change the conversation of don't teach people how to not do something, teach people how to do something. Teach people how to be respectful to women. Teach people how to see women as equals, not as a thing that you may sexually assault one day. It's like, that's just,
I think that is the ticket, how to see women as equal humans.
Yes, always equal. We're all equal always.
And it's funny that requires a shift.
But I think it's because it's just natural. Everyone's the nuclear family, right? Everyone's coming from their family, how their family was, how their family was, how their family was. Also from their own baggage, right? So, we all talk about how this one overcompensates at home because they're beat up at work, right? Everyone's always just trying to overcompensate for something. And I think the more self-aware we are of our own shortcomings, our own overcompensations, our own insecurities, the better we can be for the next generation. The better we can be communicators, because it's all just communicating. Don't be perfect at all. Like, no one's perfect, but own your stuff. Don't blame your own shortcomings on someone else. Own your shortcomings and be better for it, right?
Do your work.
Do your work and take responsibility for your life. Take responsibility for where you're wrong in so many ways. Like, it's always terrible when young boys learn from fathers that are broken and terrible to their wives and to their, to the young boys' mothers. It's because that guy's coming from so many of his own, he hates himself. I know it.
Hurt people.
Yeah, hurt people. And unfortunately, he couldn't take responsibility for his own stuff, so he took it out on the wife. And now this boy's growing up seeing how this person handles their baggage. It's all about how they're learning to handle their baggage. I knew how my mom handled her baggage. She used to abuse me, and I had to learn not to abuse myself, to then abuse someone else, because my relationships always ended badly in that way. So once you take responsibility for your own stuff, it's amazing how much more respectful you can be to other people. It's so silly and cliche to say, once you love yourself, you love everyone else a lot better. I like to say once you learn to respect yourself, you learn to respect others more. Because when you start naming your boundaries, you can start understanding people and understand other people's boundaries and be more aware and compassionate to them as well. I think compassion is an amazing thing, especially for what younger people are going through, both boys and girls. And I think compassion is just like the ultimate guide to storytelling. And compassion is the ultimate way to see things in multiple perspectives, which is always what I want to aim to do, is be able to see things from so many perspectives so people can say, oh, I identify with that person, identify with that person, identify with that person. Because that identifications is what makes something stick, It's what makes a movie or a TV show or some type of story. It's what makes us connect to it.
That feels like the whole point.
It's the whole point. Compassion, I always say, start, if you can start from there, that's great. Even in martial arts and Krav, it's like amazing how that's where we start from in so many ways. Like, you would never think, because it's such a violent act and we talk about, some brutal things, but everything always starts from a place of, if you can avoid it, do that, but using your voice. That's always number one. So yeah, I would say use your voice on both sides and don't say what they shouldn't do. You obviously say that too, but maybe push the message more of respect and equality.
Yeah.
So they start looking at someone from, oh, I respect that person, that person's equal to me, versus that's someone that I can't sexually assault. It's a terrible message to be spreading.
Yeah. It brings all the wrong energy to all the wrong places.
All the wrong energy to the wrong.
What do you kind of make of what has happened with women over the last year or two?
So much. I think there's just been a lot. I think there's been a lot of good. I think there's been good intentions sometimes being taken in ways where I think it's kind of going. I think a lot of good is happening, because this is where I say I think a lot of good is happening in the sense that a conversation that maybe was on the back burner or close to the back burner is now in the forefront. And this is across every industry, right?
Yeah.
So I think what's happened to women recently is great. Now it's our chance to be like, now that we're now we're at the forefront of the conversation, what do we do with this influence? There's so many women that have influence that I think really crap on it for what they do for their message, right?
Explain that.
Celebrities or something like that, I don't want to knock on them because I don't know exactly them as people, but I love to use them as an example because everyone craps on them, which are the Kardashians, right? Amazing businesswomen, right? But
I'll say.
Amazing businesswomen. But I think this is kind of society as a whole right now. I think we've kind of glamorized and prioritized entrepreneurship over what it means to just be a good person, what it means to be a good community. And I'm as entrepreneurial as they come, but I think they're becomes a whole slew of what it means to be successful and unsuccessful, what it means to be loved and not loved, what it means to be popular and not popular. And I think what's so funny is the more that we push everything to be that this is how everyone needs to think, this is what's right and this is what's wrong, you leave very little for all those little tiny groups, right? All those different tiny thoughts and ways of thinking and ways of being, which I think that diversity is something that's so important. I think that's where art comes in handy. That's what art's supposed to do. So point being, so how I think they sometimes crap on their influence a little bit, because I'm like, man, so many people look up to you. You could be doing so many great things for people. You know what I mean? Like, you could be spreading.
You could be saving the world.
You could be saving the world, or at least teaching people how to save the world, like just in all the best ways possible. But instead,
it's all lip gloss?
it's the lip with the plumping and the thing and the hair and the pregnancies.
Imagine all that power funneled into something else.
Imagine it. And so, I mean, because they've got the influence of boys and girls. They got both. So that's where I often think where now that we're in a great opportunity to have everyone listening, you know, now what are you going to say?
Yeah.
Let's make sure we're saying the right thing. Because sometimes the right thing, with all the right intentions, if not said the right way and not said with pause and not said in a way where it's compassionate, can often just do just as much damage as what everyone else was doing before. You know, I don't want, you know, feminists and women to be like, hey, we're over here, be afraid of us. I don't want that at all.
No.
You know, no one wants that. And, you know, that's interesting because speaking to a lot of people in different industries, like, that's sometimes how some things are taken, unfortunately. It's like, no, we want it to be, you know, women have so many great things to offer. Hire us, like, include all of us, like, so many women, you know, companies, and imagine what all of us can do together as equals, you know? We no longer, when you take out the whole gender disparity, now we can focus on so many other great things and other issues where we need to be more equal. So I would just, and granted, at the end of the day, like, I know nothing. I know nothing. I'm no one. I made a little family film, right? That be my disclaimer.
We're making it up as we go along.
But I would just, as something I would like to see and something I would like to hear is, you know, a real awesome class act of just like, okay, we're in influence. Let's say something really good, and let's let those words be, you know, what we can then grow on in the future. What are you going to do with your influence? Let's make sure we're doing the right thing. Yeah.
It feels to me like we've spent a lot of time in a separate room screaming about it. Yeah. And I'm ready to have an integrated conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is like we spend so much time screaming in the other room, we have to make sure we're not standing in the room screaming as well, because no one heard us back there either. Yeah. You know? Yeah, what it means to have a conversation. I love that.
Because we're not creating a separate and maybe equal or not equal industry.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's so funny because the industry as a whole is like still got so far to go as far as like just from a numbers game. So I guess we'll see when the numbers get a little closer how, you know, the conversations change. But it is interesting, you know, everyone's like, oh, we need to hire female directors.
Yes, and I'm ready.
I'm over here. You know, it's the same few female directors that always get hired, like on a lot of the narrative stuff. And I love that there's so much, you know, there's so many programs now, there's so many incentives, and there's so many of these things, which are great. I love that. I think that what the industry is doing is really great. Yeah, and I just think as a whole, you know, let's now we're at the table.
Start hiring.
Yeah, now that we're at the table, let's enjoy the table and, you know, speak as people who deserve to be at the table and who should be at the table. And let's create conversations that are, you know, the ones that we've been brewing on forever. Let's not get so used to be, you know, we're no longer in the back room screaming. We no longer need to be in the room screaming anymore. Yeah. It's kind of my thought on it.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have any other advice for women who are just starting out?
Now's the time. Get to it. That's essentially what I was told. No, trust your gut. I mean, everything on this is trust your gut, because every issue that I had in the film, most of them could have been just completely sidestepped by trusting your gut. Know your power. It's another thing that we've talked about. You as a woman, you have a lot of power. I mean, you've got a perspective that's been needed for a long time. Don't try to be something else because that's what's getting hired. Don't try to be just as good as the man, so I'm going to be the girl that does like just as good as that man's job, so I'm going to do everything that's just like him. No. Bring your story. You know, you've got a unique story, not only as a woman, but as you as a person. So go with that And be patient at the same time. Like, be patient. Don't be like also like me, where you have to rush to everything. Yes, you know, women are, quote unquote, I hate it when people say women are in right now. I actually had someone tell me the whole female filmmaker thing is out before I made my movie, too, which was hilarious.
The whole female filmmaker thing is out?
I was like, oh, that's fun that it's a thing. I was like, weird.
It's a trend and it's over.
Yeah. They're like, the whole female filmmaker thing, it's out now, no one's doing it. I was like,
but
okay.
We're back to men?
I was like, this PR person, too. I was like, interesting.
That's a bizarre thing
to say.
Yeah, it
was really bizarre. This is like early before I even made, you know, was shooting the movie. So know that it's not out. It's not a fad. So take your time, enjoy the process, and learn from other female filmmakers that are doing it. Like, I'm always reaching out to people, get involved in the groups. There's so many great resources now that provide women that want to be mentors. I wish I had more solid mentors at the time, but I also wasn't seeking them out in the right places because so many of them weren't really fully at the forefront yet. You know what I mean? Now I know of so many. So yeah, find a mentor, trust your gut, and tell your story.
Do you have another crazy story about your shoot that you wanted to share?
Oh, yeah, man. Okay, so there's a couple. One, we had someone throw coffee on my producer once, which was crazy.
Someone on the film?
Someone that was working on the film threw coffee on my UPM because they showed up late, and they didn't like being told that they showed up late, so they threw hot coffee on them. That was crazy.
The person throwing the coffee was late?
It was late, and they were, I think, embarrassed and overcompensating. Again, my UPM was younger than this person. People, I think, have more of an issue with age than gender sometimes because my UPM was a guy.
What?
Straight up threw hot coffee on him. Like, I called the cops and everything because she threatened to, like, do all this stuff to the movie. And I was like, well, I'm just going to call the cops. So, and I'm directing, mind you. I'm directing while this is happening. So I'm here. I'm calling the cops. I'm action.
Set up the shot. I'll be right back.
Yeah, right back. Got to deal with the coffee. So that was fun. And also, too, the final, like, fight scene, the comic one, that was originally live action. We had a thunderstorm hit it mid-shooting of it. So, like, such a downpour, lightning, we're in the forest. I leave out of Kentucky the next day. Oh, no, 2 days. So, and the next day was the last day of the shoot, then I left at 4 a.m. the next day. So I was like, there's no coming back. No coming back.
We should talk about that, which we didn't, was you use this device of a comic book.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the film, and then for these action sequences.
Yes.
It really worked.
Thank you. Well, I think what was cool is that using a lead female role that's not your typical girly girl. You know, she's just a girl of today that I would, some like very tech and artsy and all these things. A little bit of a loner, a little bit of an introvert, and she loves comic books. And you've got the comic book element of the movie where the monster's ordered from the comic book. And I wanted to always, no matter I was telling a family film or not, like I always wanted to tell, an emotionally well-rounded story. And oftentimes with live action family films, you can't really go show people dying, or fighting, because you're automatically out of the family genre.
Unless it's the mother at the beginning.
Unless it's the mother at the beginning. Unless it's animated.
Yeah.
So many animated films do this. And I noticed, and I was like, cool. So I'm going to animate everything that has to do with the mom, that dies, and then flashbacks to her are all going to be animated. One, it's going to create a very special place for those to exist within the girl's mind and her heart, but also it's going to give us an opportunity. Didn't see the future back then when I was writing the script. It's going to give us an opportunity if something goes wrong at the end, like a thunderstorm. We can now bookend the movie with, mom dying in the beginning and then mom. You've all seen the movie. Mom dying at the end. We can now bookend the beginning and the end with these comic book sequences. Because, I love family films. I love animated family films because I feel like they can just tell such emotionally deep stories because they're animated. Like, you can show
Who was not crying in the first 2 minutes of Up?
Oh, Up. Lion King. He's, like, thrown off a cliff. Goodness
Toy
gracious.
Story, my God.
Yeah, like, all of them. There's so much that happens. I'm like, it's because they're... And granted, we didn't have the budget to do animation, but I was able to hire this phenomenal storyboard artist. He did all the storyboarding for Kick-Ass. He did storyboarding for all these commercials and movies. But we were able to give him his on-screen debut. So he cut us a lovely deal. We're the only movie that he's ever had his work shown on.
Cool.
And my VFX artist essentially just animated his drawings, which was really, really cool. So that's a device that's been brought up before too. And I'm like, it's so funny because it really, I never really thought of it as being anything that innovative until I watched the movie. I'm like, wow, it really does break it up nicely.
That is really cool.
That's kind of a nice little thing.
It's a happy accident.
Well, it just, again, and it saved us when we had to do, when that thunderstorm hit. I was like, oh, it ended up working out so great. Yeah. I was definitely thinking to myself at the time when that thunderstorm was pouring down on all our heads, I was like, I'm going to have to rewrite this ending real fast.
Okay, how can people find you?
Me personally on social media at Paulina Lagudi for Instagram and Facebook. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one if you Google me because it's Italian. Mail Order Monster, same thing. Mail Order Monster on Facebook, Mail Order Monster on Instagram. Don't have a Twitter, but Jax Productions, which is my production company, has a Twitter, so Jax Prod LLC, or just look up Jax Productions. And yeah, mailordermonstermovie.com. Google.
Go stream it.
Stream it. All of it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was great. I love the topics that
You've been listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Paulina Lagudi for sharing her story. And special thanks to Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. And I'd like to thank you for finding this podcast, for listening, and for introducing me to so many incredible women. Please find us on your favorite podcast provider and leave a review. And of course, on our website, theother50percent.com, all spelled out in letters, for added features, bios of our guests, and the merch. You can also follow us on all the social media platforms. And also go subscribe to Exit 38 and the Kiss My Age show. Thanks for listening. See you next year.